So, Robbie, who do we have today?
So I'm really excited to introduce the first speaker today. So that is Alan Barrell. So he is an entrepreneur, investor, and also a professor at Cambridge University. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Alan.
Thank you so much. And let me say immediately, it's a great privilege to be here. A great privilege to have heard that opening, and you'll be very pleased to hear that I'm not going to sing. I couldn't dare, could I, after that? What a set of topics, eh? Work, education, employment, job creation and well-being. Thank you, organizers, for inviting me to be part of this great show. Now, you're going to get a lot of the detail on many of these subjects during the day. But if you will permit me, I wanted to begin by attempting to inspire us about what can be, using reminders of how great people with attitude and the right mindset have confronted equally challenging times that we are facing today, and by that mindset and spirit have actually brought great and often disruptive change to those areas that we're going to discuss today. And in addition to positive mindset, I have to argue the case in everything we do for thinking about greater connectivity. Greater connectivity. People connected are people empowered. And this is all about connectivity today, and I'm all about connectivity. When you get old like me, you can connect things. You can't do everything, but you can connect people still. So let's get our mindset right for the rest of the day. And here's a wonderful quotation to begin with. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. The world is what we make it. So, all good stories start at the beginning, and I want you to say hello to Rufus. He's my 8th grandchild. When this picture was taken, he was 1 day old. And this, as you've heard from the opening speaker, is all about the next generation. I've got 8 of them. This is my family. Hopefully work and all that stuff is about family too. I'm very proud of my family. Rufus has grown up a bit there. See him sitting in the front taking no notice of anybody, which is what little boys do. Now, the message here is not really my family. The message is the world's great family. And I believe that we are all part of a world's great family and that we can make it in our minds a world without borders. The politicians won't do it. I have to tell you, I'm despairing about Brexit. I was 100% Remainer. I really wanted us to stay and help and contribute and be constructive in the Union. And I don't quite know what the hell's going to happen, frankly, because the 3 guys that my government's put in charge of Brexit, I call them the 3 stooges, but, you know, that's just my view. But you see, if we're going to do this, it means education without borders, it means business without borders. And, you know, it's a world of opportunity that we can exploit if we do it better together. So, a bit of context very quickly. What's our world doing today? When I was 13, the population of the world was 5.3 billion. It's now 7.5. It's going to grow to 10. We're living longer, but we're not necessarily living healthier. And look at the challenges we've got. Climate change, food, water, the world economy. But the positive is we're living in the century of science. And you know, some people believe we are at the verge of a new renaissance, a new age of discovery and innovation. And I believe that we are. So the way we think, the way we behave has to be challenged. And that's why Crowdsourcing Week is such a wonderful event, because it causes us to do that. One reminder about the world economy, it's changed. The seismic shift has taken the power and influence away from the West after centuries to the East. And let's not forget, guys, that we are actually, us Westerners, if we are Westerners, and we've got some Easterners here today, I'm pleased to say, we're only 12% of the world's population. Times are changing, and we have to change too. Now, I'm not going to cover all the points in this slide, but I thought it would be interesting just to let you see some of the things that you've already discussed if you've been here all week, and the things you're going to talk about later today. This is an age of amazing change. You know, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics. The world is in a whirl. I've just come back from China, and you Take it from me. Those guys are not hanging back. They're taking a lead. So these are some of the things that you can read that we are into, and it is a time probably of more massive and very, very complicated change that the world has ever seen. And what about the unknowns and the unknown unknowns? We don't know. And the future role of universities in developing regions and in society is very important. Now, let me ask a question. Does history give us some clues and guidance? I think it does. Communication is the central core of everything we can achieve together. And I wonder how many of you will be able to name those two great heroes of communication. There's a gentleman here who can, and he knows they changed the world, these guys. Johannes Gutenberg and Tim Berners-Lee. In 1458, Gutenberg had the movable type printing press, the first one that worked, although the Chinese had it 500 years before, but they didn't have a metal typeface. Revolution, the Renaissance, books flooded across Europe. Entrepreneurs were born everywhere. An amazing age. And then, 500 years later, an even more dramatic revolution. The World Wide Web, Tim Berners-Lee. And you know what he said when they asked him why he did it? Not to make a fortune. No, not to make a fortune, not to change the world. I needed it for my work. And go away and think about that, because innovation often happens because we need something in our work. Now, where did computers and all that really start? This is Charles Babbage. He was a Cambridge 19th century mathematician and inventor, and he gave birth to this mother and father of all computers. He called it the difference machine in 1880. It's a mechanical, not digital, of course, but it works. They've rebuilt it. And you know, I'm going to now leap 130 years from Babbage in Cambridge to my friend Jack Lang, and to a little computer that you could hold in your hand like that called the Raspberry Pi. And it's a message, this, about how often innovation and education and educational progress do not always come from expected sources. We need different thinking and we need disruption. Jack and 4 colleagues in the computer lab were very depressed about the decline in the numbers of people signing on to do computer science. And they said, what if we could produce a $20 computer that people could fiddle with in their bedrooms? Because we all know young people learn more about computing in their bedrooms or in their attics than they do in the classroom. So they designed it. And they had a wonderful design, and suddenly the BBC got hold of the news, sent a reporter, and there was a television program about the Raspberry Pi, which was all being done through a foundation, not for profit. And there was so much interest in it that 750,000 people came online overnight wanting to buy one. And there weren't any, because they hadn't made any. They'd ordered the parts from China for the first 10,000. A year later, they recovered from that crash. They had the Raspberry Pi, and there's a picture of it here in the hands of another inventor, David Braben. Tiny but powerful, and there are now 10 million in the world, and they're selling 200,000 a month. And when Jack tells the story about Raspberry Pi to the students, he says, this is a story about how not to start a company, because that was not what they intended. But that's a good example of how we can learn, we can find jobs for people, we can be educated, not by the conventional means, but by out-of-the-box thinking. And I'm all in favor of out-of-the-box thinking. And you can buy the Raspberry Pi in Brussels if you want one. They're now working, believe it or not, on a $5 simple computer for programming. Amazing. But let's go back a long time before that and look at this drawing. You may say to me that is a digital drawing. It is of digital construction, but it was drawn by hand. And I'd like us just to think that over the years, many, many wonderful people have changed the world and brought us knowledge. And the man that did that drawing also gave us this painting, a giant amongst men, Leonardo da Vinci. And the lessons that I take from Leonardo are, for young people, you don't have to be specialized too early. You might be specialized, but what about a rich life that involves art, that involves business, that involves manufacturing, that involves sport, that involves a lot of things? You know, the more balanced people we can have in the world, the better place the world will be. And there's 2 guys. You may know who they are. They worked in a physics lab and they made the greatest biological discovery of all time. So they were working in physics, but they did biology. Isn't that amazing? Crick and Watson, DNA, the double helix. And little Jim Watson there was 25 years old when they made that discovery. So we must look to the youth of today and tomorrow to get things moving before they get old like me. It's interesting. This is one of my great heroes. He was in the Netherlands, and I show his example because it's an example of improvisation. There's a word for you. Improvisation is often necessary if we don't have all the money or the resource we want to get something done. What are we going to do? Give up? Lie on our backs and say, come and get me? This guy was in occupied Netherlands during the war. He was desperately worried. He was a physician about patients dying from kidney disease. He was also an engineer, and he had in his mind a model for a kidney machine that he could build if he had the resources. So he took an old washing machine and some used car parts, and he made the world's first artificial kidney machine in 1942. There it is. The patient's blood is going into the machine, coming out clean, going back into the patient. Isn't that a great example of all the things we really want to see happen? Improvisation, talent, resourcefulness, astonishing example. And ladies, I know there are some ladies present. I'm not missing out on the great ladies who've changed the world. Look at this one. Marie Curie discovered radium, polonium, the first woman to be a Nobel Prize winner. She got 2. The first woman professor appointed in Paris. Do you think it was easy? Do you think it was easy to do all that stuff? Goodness me. She died in the end of anemia due to radium poisoning because she went into the battlefields of the First World War with radium in her pocket. Wonderful lady. Amazing. Who first sailed around the world? Everyone says Columbus. Not a chance. Sheng He, admiral of the Ming fleet in the 16th, 15th century. When he was a little boy, he was captured by a rival tribe, locked up, ritually castrated, and you would have thought that was the end of him. Adversity turned him into something special. He got out of jail. He grew to be 7 feet tall. He grew to be admiral of the Ming fleet, and he sailed around the world with 62 ships, 10 times the size of Columbus's, 80 years before Columbus. Adversity will hit people, and overcoming it is part of life. Just a few quick ones here. We all know this guy and what he did. Think of the amazing changes he brought to our world with the discoveries that he caused not only to be surfaced, but also to be turned into products. And in China, where I've just been, and raising money for Europe, this crazy man, Alibaba, Jack Ma, his company's bigger than eBay and Amazon combined, he was a school teacher in Hangzhou. So, you know, he was like little Rufus when he was born, and he was a school teacher. He changed the world. Biggest IPO ever, but not only that, he was very unhappy with the way the banks were not supporting small companies, so he said, screw them. We'll start my bank online, an online bank. They've done about $500 million now loans to small companies. And he's into philanthropy. He's into philanthropy now too. Just a final one here, because I don't want only to be talking about technology. This is Alvar Aalto, a great architect and designer. A lot of young people want to do creative stuff. They don't necessarily want to do technology. Aalto is a fantastic example of someone who made design and architecture into something very special. And look what he says about the synthesis of life in materialized form. And he also said this: we have to do a little bit of play, you know. Man, essentially the eternal child. Good lessons for us, so a life can be balanced. And you know, when I look at that picture, one of Alvar Aalto's creations, I think, wow, how can the human mind conceive that and turn it into something that, if I sit and look at the picture, I feel peaceful. Wonderful. Okay, so where does these why not words come in? I said, why not? 2 words that change the world. Well, think of all those change makers I've mentioned. And here is a different kind of a guy. He's a great writer, George Bernard Shaw. And one day he was sitting in his London house with a young man, and the young man was asking him endless, stupid questions. And he stood up and he said, shut up. And he said these words. He said, you look at things and ask why. But I dream of things that never were and ask why not. And when people ask me to define entrepreneurship, that's what I tell them. I tell them that story. Why not people change the world? And my dear friend Martin sitting here, and I agree, we want to get rid of all the yes but people, don't we, Martin? We want why not people. We maybe need 1 or 2 yes but people, only 1 or 2. And here's a guy who says something equally powerful, Albert Einstein. Imagination, he said, is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is a limited, imagination encircles the world. And another quotation for you from Victor Hugo. Look at this one. Timing. Timing is everything. All the forces in the world are not so powerful as an idea whose time has come. So, let's just sort of wind up with a few thoughts about what this might mean for all of us. My belief is in brain circulation, in open innovation, in people sharing knowledge, not keeping it to themselves. And, you know, this week you've been talking about that, and crowdsourcing is all about that. This is all about open innovation and how we can do better if we work together and make dreams become realities. And, you know, if we look at today and the future and we think of the word convergence, here are three major technology platforms that are all converging together. You can't do genetics without computers and bioinformatics. Technologies have converged, and where they overlap in that little diagram, you have an opportunity for intense innovation. So if on campuses like the one I visited, or the ones I visited in Great Leuven yesterday, we put R&D, we put education, we put companies in proximity to each other, the sparks will fly. We'll get more synergy, we'll get more symbiosis, we'll get more new companies formed. And they're forming a lot of new companies in Leuven. Amazing. The 21st century university, I think, looks, and I'm almost through, not a bit like the old university in the sense that many more people are involved. Hopefully the students are more powerful, the alumni are more powerful, the partners are more powerful. Hopefully, traditionally, universities have thought themselves only as teachers and research doers, but really commercialization of research is now very important, and the government wants them to focus on that. Cambridge and Leuven universities are very old, but they're also very modern, and here's just a few things I think we have to consider when we think about how can universities develop. Virtuality. Curricularization of new knowledge is not fast enough. We're not moving fast enough in adopting the curriculum. And we talk about that later today. We've got a whole session on that. And convergence, this is coming to the end here, if you think about it, in its biggest form, brings together, and it's happened in Cambridge and it's happened in Leuven, it brings together all of the sectors and all of the elements that make for what I call an entrepreneurial ecosystem, where there's connectivity, where there's learning, and where great things happen because people work together. And we've got, of course, this wonderful technology where we walk about with the encyclopedia in our pocket, and we've got big data wherever we need it. And so I'm going to end with a quotation about excellence, because that's what we all want to achieve. And Deborah Johnson Ross told us, you better care more and risk more and dream more and expect more if you want to achieve it. And then my final picture, almost final picture, is of my friend, my friend of the past, Albert. Imagination is more important than knowledge, and if you don't believe it, you might believe that a whole class is not likely to be wrong. So imagination is more important than knowledge. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Alan. That was really interesting. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions, but Alan will actually be on the panel session later on today. So if you do have any questions, please save that till then. So next up...
Thank you, Alan, for your presentation. Here's a little token from us.
Thank you for having me. This is to help my weight loss. Thank you.
Thank you.